go ahead and get started while people keep hopping in. We're going to start off with some announcements and various things. So, first of all, welcome to our June statewide meeting. Today, we're going to do some updates from the months of May and June, which I can attest have been very eventful. Some good things, some less good things, but we'll go through them all today. We will also make some announcements for the upcoming month. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up. And then for the rest of the session, we'll be doing our Ask Us Anything. We've already gotten quite a few questions from social media as well. Even from folks who aren't members, we posted on LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, and we've gotten some interesting questions there. But then we also want to make sure this is a forum for all of our members and our friends to be able to ask questions here as well. So, starting off, hello, I'm Mitch Radakovich. I'm the board chair of All Aboard Ohio, and I'm based in Cincinnati. So I'll be your MC today. So some updates. I know that y'all's mailboxes have been getting clogged up with All Aboard Ohio emails, right? And sometimes they're really exciting and good, and sometimes they are not. We are currently in a not period with the budget, I will say. I'm going to put up a little graphic here for where we are and maybe a tiny bit of background as well. So every 2 years, Ohio goes through their budget process. And there's actually two major budgets which could impact passenger rail. The first one, which happened in the spring, is the transportation budget. And so this transportation budget, we actually had, like, for instance, the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail in that budget on the House side, but then it was removed on the Senate side due to a funding technicality. The second budget, which is actually the larger of the two, is called the operating budget. And so for both of these budgets, it gets introduced in the House. They have, well, actually, the initial thing gets introduced by the governor. Then the House gets to take the governor's budget and make any changes that they want to it. Then it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate can make any additional changes, or it can remove any changes from the House. Then, if there's too many changes, like that are different between the House and the Senate, then they go into what's called a conference committee, where they get together and they kind of negotiate it out to find the even ground between the House and the Senate, and then they finally send it to the governor, who has the ability to line item veto certain funding requests. But in terms of any like legislation that's been put into the budget, it's pretty much all or nothing for the governor. So theoretically, the governor could veto, but that's about it. Where we currently are with the operating budget, about a month and a half ago, we went on the House side, and we successfully got our Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission funding in on the House. It actually, in the initial version of the House, it was not included, but because of everybody's advocacy, we got it added in for the final recommendation from the committee, and it was voted on and passed in the House. Then, on the Senate side, we found out about a week and a half ago that their version removed the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission funding, and additionally is making other changes that we weren't even expecting. So this change is quite concerning, I'm not going to lie. And it's related to the Ohio Rail Development Commission, which is a kind of cabinet level agency. All of those commissioners are appointed by Governor DeWine. And what they have decided to add to the budget, which, mind you, has nothing to do with funding, it is only legislation, so it's an interesting place to put it, is they want to remove the passenger rail commissioner and add a second freight rail commissioner who does not have to live in the state of Ohio. Now, our take is we are actually kind of okay with having two freight rail commissioners because they're writing it as one for the class 1s and one for the class 2s and class 3s. We're not doing that as our messaging, right? But what our biggest problem is removing the passenger rail commissioner in order to facilitate that, right? That is counterintuitive, and it's going to hurt our long-term chances for passenger rail. So what we're doing now is we are actively working on both sides, the House and the Senate, because they've got both send representatives to the conference committee, and we are emphasizing the need to stick with the House version of the budget for both of those two issues. That's where we are right now. We know we do have friends on both sides of the aisle politically and also in both chambers of the Statehouse. It's just also a matter of political games. So we're working through it. We'll keep everybody posted as soon as we have additional information. But know that our advocacy team is working hard at the Statehouse right now to make progress there. In terms of other kind of framing for this, though, it is not the end of the world. These are two disappointments. It is definitely some of these very specific senators sending a message to us that they still have negative feelings towards the idea of passenger rail. But what it means is we're being noticed, right? Because if we weren't being noticed, they wouldn't have gone out of their way to add something that we weren't asking or that nobody was asking for, just as a way to kind of, poke us. So we honestly are taking it slightly as a positive, right? That there are people who probably had money who can go and say, we want this to be done. And they're actually listening to them. So we are making waves in state government now. And since this question is specific to this conversation right now from Ken, one of the frustrations with the process is there's not much transparency in terms of like who's actually putting these amendments forward. So we do not have the names that we can, like, we've got guesses, but I don't want to speculate in this public session. But we don't have the actual names of the senators who have put those amendments forward that have hurt passenger rail. What I can say is it is the Republican leadership in the Senate. And so I recommend if you have frustrations with this, to call any of the Republican leaders that are Senate-wide. So that would be Senators McCauley, Senator Reineke, Senator Gavarone, or Senator Lang, or talking to leadership on the Finance Committee, which is Senator Serino and Senator Chavez, or talking to leadership on the Transportation Committee, which is Senator Patton and Senator Schaefer. And I'm happy to discuss further, for instance, on Slack if anybody wants to send me a DM there. I just don't want to publicly speculate. Yes. Lisa, anything you want to add on that front?
No, that was pretty thorough. I mean, I will say we are getting communication from their offices to some degree in the form of their aides, which have been a bit more helpful. And I do want to emphasize that we definitely are being noticed. There is a lot we don't know, but we have been getting more information over time, but we definitely don't have the full answers.
Absolutely. What I will also say is we have more support in the Statehouse than it seems like from the news articles. Both in terms of the literal number of legislators who are actually on our side, even if they're getting pressured to not be on our side, but then also the number of times when I have called a legislator who I know is not supportive of us, and their aide is like, oh, I hope this happens. Like, this is the one thing that me and my legislator disagree on, and I'm trying so hard to change their mind. Like, that happens all the time. So we've got a lot of friends on the inside there, and that is encouraging, even if it means it's going to take us a little bit longer. Excellent. Well, we will also go on then into some other updates related to our board. So first of all, everybody welcome Lisa Buffo as our new vice chair for the board, which we're very excited about. She's done a tremendous job so far with all of the work with Advocacy Day that we had back in the spring. She's taking a significant leadership role in our annual meeting planning as well. And she brings over a decade of advocacy experience and experience with nonprofits from various startups that she's worked with as well. So everybody welcome Lisa. I have been really enjoying working with her as well. Our executive team is meshing very nicely. And I think great things are ahead in terms of the organization with Lisa.
Thank you for that, Mitch.
Absolutely. We also have 3 new board members who have been voted in. So we have Austin Rayleigh III from Cincinnati. Austin brings a really cool background because his background touches basically 4 of the major cities in Ohio. So he grew up in Cincinnati. is a proud graduate of Walnut Hills High School. Then he went to university up in the Cleveland area. I forget the university specifically. I know that he was also a football player at their school. Then he moved back to Cincinnati, but then has been working both in Cincinnati in terms of development, with our Chamber of Commerce and with like growing the business community. Also in Dayton, working for their public library system as their head of government affairs. And then now he's back in Cincinnati as the Midwest governmental lead for KinderCare. As a result of all of that public affairs work, he also has a ton of connections in state government and knows a bunch of people in Columbus, both in terms of government, but also in terms of development. So we're very excited to have Austin on the board. Additionally, we have Sally Fish, who is a name that probably many people recognize already due to her work with the Ability Center of Toledo, which is one of our big partners in the state. So Sally is an outspoken disability rights advocate, and also recognizes the incredible link between disability rights and transportation advocacy, knowing that providing transportation will provide opportunities for all members of our community, including folks who have challenges with transportation and accessibility. So yeah, we're super excited to have Sally along. She also is going to be helping to get our Toledo chapter programming on a more regular cadence, and is also going to be working with the University of Toledo and Bowling Green University to be bringing more college students in Northwest Ohio. Lastly, we have Liz Quigley, who is also a super exciting addition. So Liz, her background is in sustainability advocacy. She currently works for the Ohio State University in their Office of Sustainability. And so she is advising students. She helps with student organizations, and she also does a lot of event organization, coordination, and development work. She's already taking a big lead, as we'll talk in a couple of slides, on bringing sponsors in for our annual meeting, and also helping to grow our financial kind of having more streams of income, basically financially. And so we're really excited with a lot of the ideas that she's brought in. For some of the other organizations that she's worked with, she has put on events which have had around $100,000 in sponsorships. So we know that she has the recipe down there, and we're very excited. She also is going to be helping us to start an Ohio State chapter, and she's working with Ron Pilotowski on some of our Columbus chapter programming as well. So again, everybody, welcome these three to the board. We're very, very excited to have them. And you'll be able to meet them all in person at the annual meeting, which leads us to our next thing, our announcement section. So be sure, everybody, to have your calendars marked for July 11th and 12th for our annual meeting. The actual annual meeting will be on July 12th, which is a Saturday in Columbus. It's at the same location as last year's. We really like the fact that it's centrally located, so pretty much at a maximum, nobody has to drive more than 2 hours. We will be working on carpooling from various areas across Ohio for those who do not have accessible transportation available, because that's what we're working on. Ideally, someday everybody will have accessible transportation available. But we will have our main session on the morning of the 12th, starting at 9:30 a.m. We also, the evening before, will be having a reception at Seventh Son Brewery that's available to all members who are paying members. And there we will be honoring some of the folks who have served for a long time for the organization, and we'll just have a great time celebrating all of the achievements we've had over the past year. We also have a couple of new things this year. So like I said, we have the reception the evening before. We also are offering student scholarships. We've already had a couple of folks who have generously donated student sponsorships. So you'll see when you go to order your annual ticket or your annual meeting ticket, you can buy your ticket. And then there's also an option, if you so choose, to purchase a student ticket as well for another to allow a student who may not have the budget, or also not a student, folks who need assistance with being able to attend. So we're really excited about that. We've already had a couple of students who have applied for those scholarships as well. And I think it's going to be a really good way for us to have a talent pipeline from our universities. Additionally, I'll touch on the merch pre-orders. If you reach out to your regional directors, you'll be able to get a link to our merch pre-orders. Um, you can get a couple of different items. They can be picked up at the annual meeting. You do not have to pay for shipping, and there's a 10% discount applied. So, yeah, you can get one of those cool All Aboard Ohio t-shirts, of which I already have too many. And then lastly, we have event sponsorship opportunities. So, like I said, with Liz is helping to coordinate all of this, but we have a number of different levels that sponsors can choose. So we're ideally looking for partnerships with both small businesses, but also ideally with larger institutions as well. If anybody in this call or anybody in the organization has ideas for businesses for us to reach out to, feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to do that cold call. So, yeah. Any questions on the annual meeting? No? Okay. Then another really exciting announcement is we are, for the first time this season, announcing one of our keynote speakers. So, drum roll, please. Oh boy. Okay, our first keynote speaker is Jason Orthner from North Carolina Department of Transportation. He is the head of rail for the state of North Carolina, which is one of the states which we look to for inspiration all the time. It's having him at our annual meeting in person is also going to be the start of kicking off. Um, it's going to be the start of kicking off our series, connecting our legislators with the state of North Carolina to show them what success has looked like, to talk them through how easy it has been to expand after they got their initial start. They started with 3 routes a day, and now they're up to 5 routes a day. Um, and we are going to ask all kinds of questions to our good friend Jason, and ideally, we're going to work to have Matt Dietrich there as well, who is Jason's counterpart for Ohio. So we're very excited about that. We have some other exciting announcements to share here coming up, but I think he is going to be an excellent keynote speaker at the event. Just checking the questions to see if there's anything. Good idea, Ken, on the sponsorship side. Alrighty. Another exciting one. Let's see if I actually put the date on here because a date has been decided. And it is
Friday night, Saturday morning, first weekend of August. So I think technically
Thank
Saturday
you,
morning,
Ryan.
August 3 or August 2, whatever the Saturday is.
Excellent. So essentially, like I've shared in the past, we are going to have our Cincinnati chapter depart from Cincinnati on the Cardinal, have our Cleveland chapter depart from Cleveland, and then pick up folks in Sandusky and in Toledo, and then we will meet in Chicago. Our planning team has been hard at work with the High Speed Rail Alliance, with the I forget Derek James's organization, which is the Environmental Law Center, something like that. I'll get that specific in the chat here in a minute. And we're going to have a great day of events and activities in Chicago before we all come back to Cincinnati and Northern Ohio. So we're also working with some other statewide organizations in other states, like the Wisconsin Association of Rail Passengers and the Michigan Association of Rail Passengers, to invite them to join us in Chicago as well and do their own mini races, on the Wolverine and on the Hiawatha, for instance. So stay tuned for that. The actual ticket order forms will be out soon. We'll be coordinating group tickets so that we get a really good discount from Amtrak on that front. And it should be a great time. I know the Cincinnati chapter did a similar event about a year ago where we went up and then went back. Howard can attest it was a great time. Uh, I think we decided it's what they call type 2 fun, where you're definitely very happy you did it at the end. Make sure you bring an eye mask so that you can cover the lights out in the middle of the night. Lastly, for those who have not joined yet, please join our All Aboard Ohio Slack. Brian, I don't know, do you have access to that invite link? If not, I can get it real quick. But the uh,
I'm on the
let
iPad,
me
so it's hard for me.
Okay, I'll get it in the chat here in a minute once we're going through the Q&As. It's super important to be on Slack for getting really quick updates and invites to events and things. We also have some really great channels in there where we have good conversations, and it's basically Ask Me Anything 24/7 on our question and answer channel. So if you enjoy this, you'll enjoy the Slack. So there's the link. Thank you, Lisa, in the chat. We will now move on to our Ask Us Anything portion, so the main meat and potatoes of the meeting today. We have some ground rules, so please, we're going to be taking all questions from the meeting chat area so that we make sure that we can facilitate it easier. So please write your questions in the chat. We also, like I said, have some questions from the internet as well that we'll be going through. And we are recording so that we can share this with everybody afterwards. I know that the Columbus Pride celebration is also going on right now. So there's quite a few folks who were unable to join for our monthly meeting. When it comes to your questions, please keep them focused. Let's focus on passenger rail, on our advocacy strategy, all aboard Ohio priorities, or things that the board is doing. If somebody's already asked the question, again, we will probably work to avoid repetition. And then lastly, just note we've got a little over 30 minutes. So we will do our best to address any questions in this call. And anything that we don't address, we will give answers for as a summary when we send out the recording, which will be posted to YouTube as well. In terms of our panel, oh, Lisa's picture did not go up there. So we are just going to stick to here. It's me and Lisa today because John is currently literally marching in the Pride Parade. So we are going to be taking all the questions here. But I will ask Brian if you can help us to do a little bit of moderation as well. That would be helpful.
And so for those of you who want to ask a question
Excellent.
in the chat, please use the raise hand feature. So in the Zoom controls, click on reactions, and then there is a raise hand at the top. There were several good questions in the chat, so maybe we can start with those. One, Mitch, that I thought was interesting from Jessica was a question on what is our advocacy plan during step 2 of corridor ID, and maybe you can even give people the background on the commitments from ORDC for that, and then what we're planning for advocacy efforts during that time.
Absolutely. So it's interesting because when it comes to advocacy during step 2, a big piece of it is not necessarily an ask to our legislators. It's much more our opportunity to get the legislators so familiar with the issues that we are presenting on that by the time the next ask comes, it's going to not be as much of a discussion. So it's our opportunity. We have over a year to answer any questions they have, to kind of weed out any of the concerns or any of the misinformation that is honestly currently flying around in the Statehouse, and be able to ideally start to get things like written commitments even in advance, things that we can hold people to account for moving forward. At the same time, we're going to be shifting a lot of our focus from directly in the Statehouse to building our coalition even further across the state of Ohio. So what does this mean? This means getting all of our MPOs like in lockstep, right? Because quite honestly, they also have authority as well. And so bringing them to the table all connected together will help to move that discussion forward. Additionally, we're going to be working on getting all of our universities together and getting our business community in lockstep with us as well. Ideally, when it comes to the business community, that will be helpful on 2 fronts. One, they have a lot of clout in the Statehouse. That's just the way that Ohio works, believe it or not. So having them in agreement with us and pushing for our issues might get some additional ears listening to us. Secondly, though, having the business community on our side means we have an additional funding stream, kind of like what we talked about earlier, which will be very helpful for us doing things like adding additional hours for our staff, being able to provide specific funding to each of our chapters to do their own local advocacy as well, and bringing on additional interns who we might be able to pay, or bringing on university chapters where we can provide funding for them to do cool things as well. So we're really excited about those prospects, but that's kind of the plan for at least the first part of step 2.
Mhm.
The
So I think,
Oh, sorry,
sorry.
Brian. Maybe one other thing, which I'm sure Lisa's probably thinking about also. Regardless of how ORDC shakes out right now, we are going to work to have a significant presence at ORDC, regardless of if we have a commissioner or not. So we're going to be working to have boots on the ground in every single ORDC meeting. Those are public meetings, and we want them to feel the pressure, right? We want them to know that we are watching every step that they take. And even if it is 2 freight rail commissioners making a decision instead of a passenger rail commissioner, we're going to be making noise, and they need to know that they are still accountable to the taxpayer at the end of the day. It also means there is public comment period at the end of every Ohio Rail Development Commission meeting, and so it's our job to be loud and obnoxious. We already did a little experimentation at the last meeting, and they listened. So that's going to be another focus, making sure that, because they're the ones coordinating step 2.
So Mitch, I think I'm going to call out the question from the Youngstown group next, which was specifically, why can't we get a porta potty in Alliance? And I want to broaden that question a little bit. As we wrap up our advocacy related to budget season, what steps do you think would be practical to act as a passenger rail user advocacy? Hey, let's get updates to the Alliance station. What's going on with the Elyria station? Can we get better facilities at the various Amshacks?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, like right now, all the focus has been on budget, but as that process wraps up, maybe we can turn to some of those things. I'm curious to hear your comments.
Absolutely. I think it's a fantastic question. And it's actually something we have been talking about, right? One of the things that the Rail Passengers Association, like the national organization, does quite well is focus on the passenger experience, right? Even things like providing better timetables than Amtrak does, right? Little things where somebody Googles Passenger Rail Ohio, we want them to be able to come to us as the organization that's going to give them the most reliable information about the stations, about how to get to Cincinnati Union Terminal at 3 in the morning, about how to get home from the Toledo station at 5 in the morning, etc. What it also means, though, again, as we don't have to spend as much time focused on Capitol Square, it means that all of our regional chapters can start to put additional focus on local issues. And again, we want to provide the resources and the backing to be able to give our local chapters confidence to do that. I know we already have a really great group of folks who are together right now in Youngstown, right? And so if we could get a group of advocates together, partner them up with board members, we could get meetings with Amtrak right now, and we can talk to them about that, because getting a porta potty at that station is not a significant ask, right? That, like, they don't have to go through legal to do that. There are some things they do, trust me, because I've asked for some things. But when it comes to something like that, we also have connections with small businesses who might want to sponsor that. Like, we can get actions like that moving. So I'm happy to discuss further with the Youngstown team, and look at that crew. I think we need a full chapter in Youngstown. That's what I'm seeing. So we might talk about that here soon too. But anyways, that's my point there. One other anecdote is in Cincinnati, for instance, we're working with Metro to get transportation access to the station at 3 in the morning, because right now it's a 2-mile walk from the train station to the nearest 24/7 bus route, and that needs to change. So there's things like that all across the state, and our goal is both having the clout as our organization, but then also having the connections in our coalition across the state to be able to get movement locally too. Anything to add there, Lisa?
I just want to add a general point about advocacy. So one way you can think about it, or at least how I think about it, is that when you're trying to create change within a system, you need to apply pressure from both the outside and the inside. And a lot of what AAO does in terms of what John calls the under the dome strategy is meeting with folks on the inside at the Statehouse. We're making alliances with legislators who are actually, doing the wheeling and dealing that we can't see in the budget process. And that is important. And that is a big part of what we do. But the other part of it and what makes it so impactful is that outside pressure. So that's showing up at ORDC meetings, making calls, and not just during budget season. Having more eyes on the street, so to speak, on these legislators. And I will say, like when we did our advocacy in March, and this is going to be so important over the next 2 years, particularly leading up to the next budget season. When we did our advocacy day in March, there were some legislators we met with who didn't even know Ohio had passenger rail at all. And in a 15-20 minute meeting, they learned a lot in a really short period of time. We've also heard from aides from various offices that us, including some of you all who have made outreach, were sometimes like they hadn't heard from not lobbyists in a very long time. And I think a lot of people right now are also really focused and upset about what's happening federally, that there's not as much attention to what's happening in the Statehouse. Granted, there's also a lot happening at the Statehouse. We're seeing a lot of social services be gutted. So there's a little bit of more life and death situations that advocates and senators and legislators are dealing with, so to speak. But I just want to emphasize to this group that outside pressure is so important, and it matters way beyond budget season. And it's really going to matter leading up to our ask for phase 3, that we don't step off the gas at all. And we continue to talk to them. We continue to educate them. You can email them every day if you want for the next 2 years. That is your right as a citizen of Ohio. And Ohio also has it where you may think you can only call your rep and your senator, but you don't have to. You can call any of them and talk to them as concerned citizens. So please, I just want to add that extra encouragement that while AAO will continue to advise and update the advocacy kit and work with the Under the Dome strategy, all of your efforts really do matter and will continue to matter incredibly over the next 2 years. So, and thank you so far for all of your work. We still have a lot to do, but it has made a huge difference even in just a few months.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been joking with folks, especially like folks who live in my neck of the woods and have the same senator as me. We already know that our senator is supportive. So I say, here's the list of 24 Republican senators. Close your eyes and pick one. I'm a citizen of Ohio. Boom. So excellent. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, so next question I'll call out. So one of Jessica's questions in the chat here, I'm going to direct this one to Lisa to give her a chance to answer. Jessica suggested, hey, could we invite other legislatures to the AAO annual meeting? I really like that idea, and I wanted to get your reaction on it.
Yes, and that was one of the first things we talked about and are planning on doing. However, because the annual meeting is on a Saturday and it is in the summer, it is likely they will be, from what I've heard and understood, they tend to go home on Thursday night. We are still going to invite them. We are still going to make the effort. And it is right after July 4th. So it is a little bit of a tough time in terms of, being a Saturday in the summer, but it is so important and we are going to do it. And that is why we reached out to folks like Jason Orthner so that this is a bigger ask. A lot of the questions we got during Advocacy Day and as a whole, and I'm sure as you know, is can this work in Ohio, right? Has this been done before? There's so many answers to that question, but by inviting real life counterparts and folks to in other states that are very similar to Ohio, it actually invites that in-person dialogue that is not just coming from us advocates. So having Jason there is a big step and a big part of that strategy, and saying, hey, maybe consider staying a little bit longer. This is going to be your chance to ask him questions and be there in person. So we did consider that when we were looking at who our speakers were going to be, and we are planning on making those asks. Do you want to add anything, Mitch? Or?
No, I think that's perfect. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so quite a few questions in the chat that I'm kind of looking through. Maybe we'll turn to a live question. Jessica, so if you'd like to pick your favorite question and ask that, we'd love to hear from you. Oh, but you are still muted. Let me see here. Let's see. Ask to unmute. There you go, Jessica. You should be able to unmute.
Yeah, hi. Sorry about that. I guess this question sort of follows up on everything we've been talking about. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah. Mitch kind of painted everything in terms of the organization's advocacy strategy, both inviting the legislators to the meeting, talking about growing your base and the planning or the city planning organizations. Is that something that leadership is mostly that is that where that's coming from? Or did you have at one time there was discussion of the advocacy guide, including some ways that individual members could reach out to an organization in their community, or those other groups, chambers of commerce, whatever, that we talked about. And that I know we had to focus on the budget and the senators and representatives right now. But is that still the plan? Is it mostly the leadership that's doing the outreach to the business community and whatever, or are you looking for something from the individual members, and are you going to do guides for that, or?
So I think the main ask from members right now is for leads, right? So we've got folks who are specifically trained on speaking on behalf of the organization when it comes to what is our strategy, what are our results, those kind of things. Our ask is, if you have a personal relationship with somebody, to please make the connection for us. And if you have ideas for people for us to reach out to let us know. I think that's the start right now. Moving forward, that might be subject to change. And if it is, we'll be sure to communicate that broadly.
Because I also want to point out, we don't really have, there's some resources on the website, but like the Ohio Runs on Rail is very long. Some of the flyers that we used to have, I have copies. They still have kind of the older branding, so I haven't really wanted to give them out because I thought that was really,
Jessica, I think that's a great point, and I think one of the ways that we'll work on addressing that is making sure we've got a big fat stack of the new trifolds at the annual meeting. So we'll take a note of that and have a big stack. I know you are not the only person that's asking for that. We've had a number of people asking for that, and I think it would be wonderful to have something like that to be able to distribute there for everybody to take.
Quite honestly, our constraint is in our communications team's time.
Yep.
And we do have a longer term goal to have even just one pagers that people can print off at their home printers or at the library to hand out. It's on the timeline. It's just, yeah.
So I'd like to turn to some of the questions that we got through Reddit in our social media channels. So let's see, and I think I'll take the first stab at this one. One of the questions we got in was, hey, I'm all for trains, but I feel like in the US, the trains are usually slower and more expensive compared to bus and sometimes flying. How long would it take to go from Columbus to Cincinnati, and how much would a train ticket cost? And I think that's a wonderful question, and that gives us a chance to address some things. One of the reasons I'm so excited about Jason Orthner from North Carolina coming and joining us at the annual meeting is because they could talk about the history of North Carolina Rail. And some of you were probably able to join a few months ago our Northeast chapter meeting. I gave more details on the North Carolina Rail. So a few things I would emphasize. First off, Amtrak tickets are very reasonable. So, I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know Columbus to Cincinnati, but as an example, Dayton to Cleveland in other similar markets, an Amtrak ticket is probably something like $35, right? Toledo to Cleveland is $16. It's incredibly reasonable. People would use it all the time, except that the two trains each direction are in the middle of the night. So as far as cost, I think a lot of the perceptions of Amtrak being expensive are based on very long distances on long distance rail. Intercity tickets in the 50 to 200 mile range are quite reasonable on Amtrak today. So that's one part of the question. The other part of the question is times, like, hey, how long would it take to get from Columbus to Cincinnati? And there are railroaders who are more familiar with the operations that can get a better answer on those specifics. But I will point out things like, hey, Chicago to Cleveland, the schedule for Chicago to Cleveland on the now Floridian, former capital, was scheduled for 6.5 hours, right? That's not much longer than driving, and that's with minimal different additional infrastructure upgrades. Other parts of the Amtrak service are much lower. It really depends on the underlying freight infrastructure. So the comment that I would make is that when North Carolina really started investing in passenger rail to serve specifically the state of North Carolina, going from Charlotte to Raleigh, that service was slow. There were parts of it that only ran 35 miles an hour. There were other parts that were more the 79-mile an hour, but they got it started, and it was useful to a number of people. If you don't have any options, it doesn't matter how fast or slow it's going. And so for students, for people who are aging, for anybody who just really doesn't want to drive and has time, it's still a useful service and worth investing in. And then once you have the service started, you can build the political coalition to invest more in it. One of the things that I love about passenger rail as an investment of our public transportation dollars is the fact that you can always make improvements, right? When you start a new bus service, the first day of that bus service is the best it's ever going to be. When you start a new rail service, there are always opportunities to make additional investments to make incremental improvements. So in North Carolina, they started with a slow service that was 2 times a day each direction. And then they got enough people riding that they were able to make investments to improve the speed. They were able to make investments to improve the number of trains, the frequency of service. They were able to make investments to improve the reliability, to improve the comfort. And now they're at a point where they've got 5 trains each direction every day connecting their 3 largest metro areas. And guess what? Those 3 largest metro areas only have about 2/3 of the population that would be served by the Ohio 3C and D, right? The Ohio 3C and D is a service that would serve 7.5 million Ohioans being within a 30-minute drive of a station. So it serves a lot of people. And once it gets started, you can invest it. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's a question we get from politicians a lot too. I mean, that was Tom Patton's very pointed question. It's like, hey, if I'm leaving my house at 6 a.m. and not getting to Columbus until 10:30, it doesn't do me much good.
And I don't think it's going to be that slow, to be clear.
Exactly. And that's
the estimate is right around 5 hours to start from Cincinnati.
Cleveland to Cincinnati.
Yeah. So,
you know, a lot of people will be riding it to Columbus, which would be, you know, much quicker than that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Mitch, was there another favorite of yours from these social media questions?
So there was a question about is the end goal for this movement a more connected Amtrak network in Ohio, or a centralized system that runs exclusively as a statewide system? And are both feasible / cost effective? This actually is another good one that we can point to North Carolina on, where what we're talking about is 2 different types of routes, right? There are state-supported routes and there are long-distance routes. All of the trains that go through Ohio right now are long-distance routes. And the idea is for these state-supported routes to be in the same network as the long-distance routes, and essentially they work in tandem with each other. When we talk about North Carolina, yes, they have 5 trains a day between Raleigh and Charlotte, but not all of those trains each day are the state-supported routes. But in combination, it leads to 10 trains a day between them. And so it would be similar here. In general, it will most likely, and this hasn't been decided yet, but it will most likely be Amtrak operating the route in Ohio, like the state-supported routes as well. And it would use the same ticketing system, the same network. You would buy it on the Amtrak website as the long distance routes. In terms of feasibility, what's nice there is they already have a set up network. We can share all of their services, and so that is probably the more feasible approach.
I'm curious, maybe just either putting in the chat or by show of hands, folks on this call that might be interested in participating in the race to Chicago on Saturday morning, August 2nd, and where you would be coming from. So glad to see some hands there. I know Bill talked about hopefully coming from Cleveland, so that's great. Diana, we can't hear you. If you want to unmute yourself, you can. Yeah, so like I said, just put it in the chat.
Excellent. Okay, so I've got another question that we'll have Lisa go for. Um, let's see. Did the adjoining states lose funding too? Do our plans have overlap and dependencies on theirs? Maybe perspective from the Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit.
Adjoining states like Michigan and
Exactly.
I don't know the direct answer to that question.
Okay, then I could take it.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I guess the short answer is their state houses are not taking away the funding like Ohio is, and quite honestly, the corridor ID funding is still totally on track right now. So it's not like we are losing the funding for that. That is still on schedule. Our plans do heavily overlap with other states. And there's a reason that we are working so closely with advocates in, for instance, Northwestern Indiana when it comes to the Midwest Connect. Um, even though Ohio is the sponsor of the Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit route, we also will be working very closely with Michigan's passenger rail leadership there as well. And so the other thing I will say, because most of the money that's going into these routes is federal funding, we've been looking very closely at the funding proposals which are going around in Washington right now, and we are actually pleasantly, I won't say surprised, but kind of, with what the proposals have been for continuing funding for Amtrak, for continuing funding for routes outside of the Northeast Corridor, which is Ohio, right? And for also improving funding for transit. So we have some hope there. Our dreams are not being crushed on the federal level. I knock on wood. So that is my answer there. Northeastern Indiana. Thank you, Brian. In terms of a state law that requires restrooms in public places, I do not think that we'll be able to take a legal approach, but we might be able to make a sentimental pitch to local leaders. I'm sure that most of them are unaware that, because that is inhumane. I will go public on that, right?
Yeah, and then I
Um,
mean, kind of when you talk about local leaders from perspective, I mean, I was having conversations with, you know, community leaders in terms of the ODOT transportation meetings, and there were people in there that were representing communities based on transportation in the Akron Canton area that were surprised that there even exists an Amtrak station in Alliance. Um, so, and maybe that's a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the ODOT public meetings. So thank all of you very much who had a
okay.
chance to attend one of the ODOT public meetings. You know, maybe even if you got to attend a public meeting where there wasn't a board member, you could even give your comments on that process. One point that I will make is that the main people who were driving those sessions for ODOT were appreciative of hearing our voices, appreciative of having people from all over Ohio attend those meetings. In fact, one of the ODOT reps told me point blank, he's like, "Hey, we think this is great. Some of the meetings that we had as ODOT, there wouldn't have been anyone there if it hadn't been for all aboard Ohio people showing up." So they definitely appreciated and respected us sharing our voices. And then, as Jessica pointed out in the chat there, ODOT is still taking feedback on that survey. So this is kind of Access 2050, their long-term strategic planning. So please make your comments on the web now. And ODOT has committed to in October, they are going to be doing another listening tour and presenting the follow-up from that initial listening tour. You know, get the process here. Here's all the input we heard. But thank you everyone who made your voices heard through that ODOT process.
Yes, absolutely. Completely echo those sentiments. Another question we got is, why can't we encourage rich entrepreneurs to invest and develop 3C and D just to show the other states the importance of rail travel in the United States? We are not closing that off as a possibility for us to advocate on. Like, we are open to looking at any angle to get passenger rail development in Ohio. And if that means something that is more on the private funding side of things, let's look into it. We are, I mean, already, like I said, working very hard at getting the business community involved as much as possible. And it is true that there are, even in other states, um, private undertakings where people can see passenger rail actually uh, making economic sense to start a business around. So we're open to it. I think the bigger piece is going to be if we can have large institutions financially backing even estate development. That could also be an interesting way forward. And it makes it a lot harder for folks in the State House to push back and say no if some of our loudest voices on the economic side um, are pushing for it.
Maybe I'll add some comments on that too. I mean, if you think about transportation investments, there are the primary economic impacts, selling tickets and having retail in stations and things like that. And then there are secondary economic impacts. So the connections that are enabled drive other business, connections between universities, connections between businesses, connections to the government. With transportation projects, so much of the return is in those secondary economic impacts. When you're running a business, you run a business based on primary economic impacts. So in order to fund transportation popularly, you have to be able to tap into those secondary economic impacts. Now, in the United States, that's all accepted for roads. Roads are just a cost, but we know that they drive the economy, and that's why the government invests in them. Part of the point we're trying to make is that, hey, it's the same for transit via rail. Those secondary economic impacts are what we're getting. But if you think about it from running a business standpoint, it becomes much more difficult to capture those secondary economic impacts. So Brightline in Florida, the way they're doing that is they own a lot of real estate around the stations. They are developing that real estate around the stations. That takes a huge amount of capital to be able to successfully execute. So there's just not a lot of businesses that are in a position to do that. So as Brightline goes their business, we would continue to be open to that. But I also think we need to be realistic on the number of passengers that would be generated. In, for example, the state of Ohio are not going to be the route that would be most interesting to Brightline next, right? The next most interesting route in the country would be Dallas to Houston. We'll see what happens there. They have their own political challenges for that. Now, a way we could potentially take advantage of that, Ohio. Oh, sorry, is to set up.
No, I was gonna. I was just gonna say what we can. Yeah. And what we can push for, right, is getting the voices of developers who have an opportunity to do what Brightline is doing at our new stations. For those who have been to most of our stations in Ohio or where they plan on putting stations, one of the pretty common characteristics is a good sized parking lot across the street. And that could turn into housing, that could turn into retail, that could turn into a food hall. And those are all things that a developer stands to gain from. So they seem to be pretty low-hanging fruit for our coalition, I will say.
Yeah, I remember the owner of Market Garden Brewery here in Cleveland. He made a comment. He said on one of these, hey, let's get rail in Tower City. And he said, hey, if you get rail in Tower City, I will open a Market Garden Brewery in Tower City. So kind of the type of person who understands the benefit there.
All right, let's get him as a sponsor, Brian. We'll talk after. With that, it is 10:59 and 45 seconds. So are there any last minute questions to send in the chat? Otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Unless, Lisa, do you want to add something?
I just want to say, Jessica, thank you for your point about updating the advocacy kit for how individual members can help, and just make a note sort of high level on strategy. So one of the reasons that this budget season has been so important is to see what the current temperature is at the State House for rail. There's also going to be another election and changes at the State House before what would be phase 3. So us getting to the other side of the budget process is going to be pretty clear whether we have support or we don't, or how actively we have support or we don't. And then based on that, we're looking at, plan B, C, D, and E, all these other options. So when folks mention things about private investment or, different ways to make this happen and how to get involved, do know we're looking at all of that, but we will know a lot more after budget season where the appetite truly stands with this current legislature, and that will give us a better sense of clear direction the next few years, which will then have action steps for members. So that is something we are thinking of and is coming, but we're not totally through that season yet, but close.
Is there a, it sounds like, the Rail Commission was able to pursue step 2 without adding extra funding in this budget. But now there was some talk that one of the versions might cut their funding from where it is now. So that's part of the concern with the Senate as well, with one.
We think that there was a clerical error on the Senate side of the budget. We know that we are actually in lockstep with the freight railroads and advocating for that to be fixed, so we're not concerned on that front.
Oh,
Good. So it's a good final question, because that's the one that there actually does seem to be good news on with this. So thank you all very much for joining us. Any other closing thoughts, Mitch?
No, I think that's about it. So my encouragement again is please join us on Slack if you have not yet done so. I'll resend the message at the bottom of the chat here.
is there a Slack channel specifically to the annual meeting?
We will post all annual meeting updates on the general channel.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good seeing everybody. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.